And we're recording.
Hi, everybody. It's Ryan Johnson of Ryan Johnson for 39th LD. Tonight, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about Referendum 90 in ways that nobody else is going to. We are going to talk about it in the serious ways, and we are going to talk about it in the absurd ways, just to show how absurd the criticisms are. So sit back, enjoy, and here we go. Joy, can you open with the YouTube video?
Sure, give me just a moment here and I will share my screen. And share screen. There it is. Optimize screen sharing for video clip. Now we can do it. There we go.
Okay, well, they always say don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, but I have no idea what answer. I like to gauge how well I fit my district. And one of the ways I do that is by looking at the initiatives and referendums and then putting that against my own personal voting.
I'm gonna pause him for a second. Can you guys all hear and see Keith Wagner's video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go back.
Not my voting in Olympia, but my voting as a individual in the 39th legislative district. I find almost invariably that my vote matches the majority of the votes of my constituents. And I think that makes me a pretty good fit for the district. So there's a referendum up right now, Referendum 90, that deals with the comprehensive integrated sex education that is wildly controversial. So I'm just wondering how you feel about that bill and how you might vote.
That's a fair question, and I'll be very honest with my answer to you about that. I will definitely be voting for that initiative. I trust the educators in our public school system to be able to teach their students appropriately at the appropriate age level. And because I was one of those children at a very young age that was abused, I feel it would have been very, very helpful if I had known what was going on at the time. So yes, I will definitely be voting for that.
Well, thank you for your answer, and I'm sorry about your situation. I truly am.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Keith.
All right, what a way to open this talk. Man, I'm sure he wished he had not answered that question or asked that question. Susan, I am going to turn it over to you. So go ahead, tell us about being on the working group, how the law was passed, what the law does, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, this actually started, the actual initial comprehensive sexual health education bill started back in the work on it pretty much 2017, and the bill first came up in 2018. And what this was a reaction to some things that had already were already in the works. And one of the things that we've been doing for several years, and I think Ethan's probably pretty familiar with it since he's been involved, is the Healthy Youth Survey. And that is a survey that is done in schools for our secondary students, usually starts in grade 6th grade on up through 12th grade, which is a middle school, high school. And this survey is done about every 2 years. So this year is going to be another year for that. And some of the data that we have been getting back has been extremely disturbing. And for example, the increase in STDs with our students ages 17 to 25 has gone up 23% in the last 4 years. if we were looking at our pandemic that we're doing right now in the same numbers, that would be quite startling. But that is one of the things that definitely caught our eye. Another part of it that is extremely important, and for a couple of different reasons, is that 1 in 5 of our girls and 1 in 8 of our boys graduated from high school stated in their healthy youth survey over in 2016, and again, the numbers were very well matched in 2018, that they had been approached with unwanted attention and touching before they graduated from high school. And those numbers are just alarming. And during the 2018 session, another thing that came upon our legislatures was the opportunity to pass Aaron's Law. And that is the childhood sexual abuse law. And they passed it through both House and Senate unanimously in 2018. And what that bill actually did is it set OSPI up with the task of reviewing curriculum and also developing recommendations for school districts, but it didn't really have a lot of teeth to it. And when we got the results from the 2018 Healthy Youth Survey, it was a wide awake opener for us to say, hey, something has got to be done. Because right now in our schools across our Washington state, the only part of sexual health education that is required is the HIV/AIDS prevention piece. That's the only thing that's required of any school in the state, any school district. Now, many of our school districts already teach a comprehensive sexual health education. Well over 50% already do. And so when we first approached this in 2017, we were looking at, or 2018, sorry, we were looking and thinking that this was pretty much with the Aaron's Law coming up and the numbers that we were getting, that it made a lot of sense to say, okay, this is going to be the backbone that Aaron's Law needs. And these are some things that back up the numbers that the reports from the Healthy Youth Survey is saying that we're missing in our curriculum, to have a comprehensive program that teaches more than just HIV/AIDS education, that we needed to do more. And so that's why we found the support for this, and we had our representatives and senators bring this forward. And it was not passed in 2018, so we brought it up again in 2019. And between that time, we had our work group, and Lori Dills from OSPI was our facilitator. And I have to say that going in as an educator, I've been on a lot of different work groups, but most of the time you go in and everybody's pretty much of the same mind. This was the most diverse group of people that I have ever worked with on a work group. We had parents, we had teachers, we had some students come in. It was pretty amazing. And we spent a number of hours of going through exactly what requirements for a comprehensive sexual health education would need to have in order to meet the needs of what we were seeing from our Healthy Youth Survey, the things that we know are important for children to learn at young ages, and in order to support the learning as they go along. It was it was itself a very comprehensive work group. And the recommendations coming out of that basically became the law that the legislature passed this last year. So that in a nutshell is kind of the history of where this came from and what our hopes were. To us as educators, and especially me from a school district and I used to teach in the Shoreline School District, I've never taught in a school district that did not teach a comprehensive program. And I've been teaching for almost 40 years. So it's just very interesting to me that we can't get over this hurdle that this is what needs to be required of all schools. It doesn't mean that it's required of all students, because parents absolutely have every right to teach this in home and to opt their children out of the program during that time. Absolutely, we absolutely support that and are very thankful that we have parents that can do that. But in so many situations, we have students who those needs are not being met, and we need to make sure that all of our students are getting medically accurate information, and it's being delivered in a way that is sensible and very conscientious to all of our students from all their backgrounds. And this is what a comprehensive program does. I know that in that video, one of the terms that was used was integrated, and I don't know where that came from. That's a totally different way of teaching. And no, this is a comprehensive. That means it's going to include more than HIV/AIDS education. So, any questions?
Oh, so many questions. Who wants to start? Hell with it, I'll start. You said that 50% of schools already teach sex ed.
Yes, over 50%, yes.
Right. And I have been told by a teacher in the Arlington School District, that with this new law, almost nothing will change.
In most of those school districts, in my school district, no, nothing will change.
Perfect. If you could put a geographic location on the, let's say, 45% of schools that are not teaching any sex ed, where would that geographic location be?
That's kind of an interesting one, because I know where are some of the resistance to the bill is coming from, but I also know teachers within those areas, those legislative areas, that are actually teaching a comprehensive program right now. So that's kind of interesting where it's coming from. But where the resistance a lot of times is coming from is just from some of the smaller districts around, and it's on both sides of the mountains, but it is usually smaller districts.
So
That's
let's
the
say
simplest way to put it. Most of our metropolitan,
probably.
pardon me?
Districts with under 500 kids, probably.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who else wants to go? I haven't even begun to delve into the absurd yet. I'm actually asking serious questions.
Okay, I got a question. I decided to go on Ballotpedia and look some stuff up. Looked up some of the arguments against it. Now I want to make the statement first saying I don't agree with any of these arguments. I'm just asking them for the fun of it. But Washington State Senator Shelley Short says that the sex ed will be taught to kindergartners and that it should not be taught like that because it'd be misguided and it's unsafe.
Okay, and that is one of the things that is one of the big, huge misnomers. And anyone who's taken time to actually read the law or even the public statement that's come out of OSPI, it says very right away in the beginning of the bill that there is no sexual health content required for students in grades K through 3. Because and if you look at the standards of our health curriculum in our area of sexual health education, the state standards, there is nothing listed in there, and it just says this topic will be covered when it's developmentally appropriate. So nothing K3, there's nothing in for sex ed. It's all a social emotional learning, and there is a area of our health standards called social emotional learning. But when we start thinking about the type of content that we need to talk about for the aspects of, say, Aaron's Law, it takes it a little bit more from the internal of, how do I feel as a person and how do I control my emotions and all of those things. It takes it into the relationships. And for the smallest children in our primary grades, that means how to make friendships, how to be a good friend, how to recognize a friend, how to recognize adults that are helpful and safe, how to recognize adults that might not be, and what to do about that. So that's what their education is going to be, and such an important part of that groundwork that we build up to make children feel safe about the way they feel about themselves, the way that they interact with each other, the way they interact with adults and feel comfortable interacting with adults that they feel safe with, as far as being somebody that they can trust, is so important when we start moving into our older grades, where part of the content that that is going to be required to be taught is affirmative consent. Because that is one of the things that came out with the Healthy Youth Survey that was a big red flag, is the fact of so many of our students saying that they were having unwanted contact. And so affirmative consent is something that is spelled out in the law that needs to be part of that higher higher high school, secondary learning and middle school learning. But it all starts with that base that we can do with the smaller children. So that's why that's part of it.
What is Aaron's law? What does that come from?
Aaron's law is actually it's a federal law that Washington State passed in 2018, and it came about as basically brought forward, and it was spearheaded by a woman who had been sexually abused as a child, and several states have signed on. I think I should look. I mean, more of them were signing on year after year. But this law basically is a childhood sexual abuse prevention law. And in the state of Washington, what it does is it addresses sexual abuse prevention in Washington State schools. It doesn't require the schools to provide sexual abuse prevention education directly with that, but it does ask OSPI to review any curriculum that a school district might bring forward and also develop recommendations for school districts. So our look at Aaron's law is pretty soft, and in order to give it a little bit more teeth is to say, yes, we do require some social emotional learning at the lower ages and affirmative consent at the upper grades.
That's great.
So I actually have another question about how this would work once it's passed. How would OSPI enforce this to the school districts? That, because I'm assuming there's probably going to be some in Eastern Washington are like, no way, I don't want to teach this, or find some loop around to get around the referendum. Is it possible for them to do that? And how would OSPI force them to do it?
It's the same with any other curriculum. School districts are required to teach math. School districts are required to teach language arts. You know, all of these, it falls along, and that's in the same thing. And every year, school districts need to report back to the state what they offered as coursework in order to be accredited. And so they have to have that listed then as a course offering, that yes, they did provide this for their students. It's basically just a survey that school districts fill out at the end of every school year. And it's pretty general. And so it would just be listed as another one of the items, just like math and language arts and physical education and things like that.
Hey, Ethan, save the most absurd questions for about 10
Yeah, that was
minutes
the absurd
now,
one.
right? And this will be the only time you'll ever be able to ask a teacher these questions, so this will be a gift for you too. Let's dispel the save the local control argument. There are already standards for every type of curriculum you teach now.
Correct.
If you take this, keep the local control argument to its end here, what a whole lot of people are saying is, we want to make standards as we see fit for our local district on anything, not just this.
Right.
Okay, that was going to be my question. Am I wrong in that argument?
I'm sure, you know, I haven't heard it to that extreme ever, but I'm sure that, you know, I don't know, there's probably people out there who would love to write their own standards and things like that. You know, that's what our private schools do. But the standards are also things that allow schools to prove their accreditation. So if you're going to be an accredited school and recognized for, say, a student graduating from your school to have their courses count toward a graduation requirement and then move on to a higher ed university or junior college, you have to have accreditation. And so that's what those standards are there for, is to prove that, yes, you have met a specific level of learning that meets the standards of the state. And so it's really kind of one of those things. It's like, yeah, you can wish for it, but there are certain things that, you know, if you want to go onto higher ed, you're going to have some accreditation, and there's certain things that need to be done. But I know that the local control question comes up very, very much. And a lot of it has to do with, well, is the misconception that, well, the state is going to make us teach a particular curriculum. And that is the last thing OSPI wants to do, is tell people what they need to teach. They're in charge of saying these are the standards. Any curriculum, any school district can choose any curriculum they want. They can choose parts of curriculum and put things together to kind of make up their own thing. So there's total freedom at the local level as far as what curriculum you teach, as long as it's meeting the standards. And OSPI is there for us to tell us, okay, these are the standards, and they have tools to help us vet curriculum against to see if they are the things that are meeting the standards. And that's all they're there for. They're not there to tell us which curriculum we're going to teach. That isn't what they're going to do. It's up to school districts to find their own curriculum. And that's what makes it so important, that particularly when it's something that's sensitive, that you have your students on that adoption committee, you've got your parents on that adoption committee, the teachers that are going to be teaching it have to be on that adoption committee. You've got to come together with something that everybody supports. And that's what the adoption process at the local level is all about. And that's where the curriculums are chosen. They're not chosen by the state.
You okay if I add to what you're saying about the adoption part? So I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago when I was in middle school. No, it was like 4 years ago then. Our district in Snohomish was adopting their new program that they were thinking about. So we got to be the test for what that would look like. And I've experienced that as well. And I can say for a fact that at least my district definitely had parent comments from that, asked for students' comments, and we're very, very, very careful about choosing what they were going to choose to teach, because it took them a few years to figure it out for that. And they were, I know that they also weren't uniform in the way that they were doing it with the 2 different schools in the district that taught high school, at least, because they did different ones for Snohomish and different ones for GP to test out which one was better in the district.
I have a question for Susan. One of the words that we hear about and sometimes get criticisms from the opposition is about affirmative consent. And I have a background as a trained volunteer crisis intervention counselor. So I have a lot of training and education with sexual assault. So the words affirmative consent make sense to me, but I feel like the opposition doesn't really understand what that means. Can you describe kind of in more simple terms what affirmative consent is, especially with wording that would apply to the K through 3?
Affirmative consent means basically teaching people to understand no means no, and to recognize body language, facial expressions, things like that, to be able to read people, to learn how to read people. And we do this with our small children about, did you see when somebody was sad? Did you see when somebody was happy? Getting them used to reading some personal cues from people so that they can understand that different ways that people can say yes, or and be inviting, and the way people can say, no, I'm not real comfortable with this. So it's basically the teaching people that no means no.
Here's actually what I was recently taught in high school, because they don't teach this in elementary school, a little bit in middle school, but specifically in high school. They showed us a video about tea. It's kind of funny, actually. Yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about. But the video is about tea, about whether you asked if they want the tea or not. If they want the tea, then you can give them the tea. If they say they want it later, you can do it later. You can't give them it now. And it's basically just a long video about referring to the difference with consent with tea in that situation. Like, you can't give it to them if they're unconscious, but you can give it to them if they are willing to and they're conscious, but they cannot be drunk. And like it goes into a lot more detail, but that's basically one of the ways that they show us in school.
Interesting.
It's fun.
I have a question. So,
I have a question for Ethan.
oh,
Eric, go ahead, Erica. My bad.
I was wondering about private schools. You said that private schools adopt their own curriculum, but they do have to be accredited, right? So they have to show OSPI that they've done some sort of work towards meeting the
There are
standard.
some, the requirements for private schools are different.
Mhm.
Those are different. So, you know, I did do some teaching in private school, but yeah, private schools run by, they don't have to have state accreditation. But if you're going to be accredited by our state, then you do need to be teaching to the state standards. And, you know, of course, Ethan probably knows too, and do the state testing and kind of stuff.
I have a question for Ethan on this subject. Ethan, how psychologically damaged have you become because you took this training through your school?
I haven't become psychologically damaged. It's always a little bit awkward, more I'd say for the teacher than anyone else in the classroom. But I wouldn't say it's damaging at all. They don't show, especially in my district, they will not show graphic images, anything like that. It's very, 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 very safe. It doesn't do anything hurtful.
So you've survived completely, right? I mean,
Yeah.
wow, what a shock. Okay. Who else wants to ask questions before I delve into the absolute absurd?
Wait,
Or is
can I kick off one absurd one?
do what?
Can I kick off one absurd question?
Absolutely.
So this has to do with Representative Robert Sutherland, and what piqued my knowledge and interest in this bill initially was on the House floor. He called it pornography, and I frankly can't see anything in it all that's pornography. Do we know where he's getting this crazy idea?
I think
I've seen some. So we do have a parents group for communication amongst the parents in the Arlington School District, and it's all parent operated. And I've seen people share stuff from external Facebook groups that are the opposition to the sexual education bill, and their flyers and the information on them, I can't find any of that anywhere. It's like it's being made up. I don't know. It just seems crazy. I don't know.
I think that people are afraid to even bring up the subject of sex with kids, because it's just like, they'll go crazy. They'll start thinking about it, and you're giving them ideas, and let's just keep it hush hush. Let's just not talk about it. I think that's the impression that I get, is that people are just, don't educate kids about sex. Don't bring up the subject. You know what I mean? That's what it seems like.
Hey, Ryan, what's your next crazy question?
All right, Susan, you ready?
I'm ready.
Perfect. Did you support this bill just so you could watch Pornhub with your kindergarten students?
No.
Perfect.
No.
I don't know. You look a little.
How long do kids have to be in kindergarten before you start teaching them to masturbate?
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Perfect. I told you this was going to be in the absurd. This is what they're saying. Ethan, you want to jump in here?
It is what they're saying. It really is.
They won't teach you any of those things.
That's not
ever.
No kidding. That's not how this was supposed to go. You're supposed to ask the absurd questions as well.
Absurd questions. Hold on, I got.
All right.
I got one.
Okay,
Eric,
so
Somebody said it was funded by Planned Parenthood, this whole thing.
another question here, arguments against this on Ballotpedia by the Washington State Catholic Conference says that affirmative consent, they're specifically talking about how kids should not be having sex till marriage on here, and that this bill will promote teens and kids having sex before marriage by allowing consent. That's what they're saying. I know it's completely wrong, but
Okay, can you answer those two, Susan?
I'm not quite sure the question. Let's see, Erica, your question was, I can't remember what it was.
Is Planned Parenthood funding all of this?
Oh, okay. Planned Parenthood is just, they jumped on board as a supporter of the bill. And they are actually they are the group that is headed up the coalition for the Approve R90. That's kind of their take in it. But the actual kind of motor behind this whole thing, like I said earlier in the beginning, was students approaching the legislators, particularly with the results of the Healthy Year survey. And so that's where that came from. But then Planned Parenthood, being who they are, of course, are supporters of it, and we're supporters of the bill and are behind they are the platform that's the heading the coalition for Approve R90. So, but that's just their capacity in there. But it isn't like their brainchild or anything.
Yeah.
And the other piece was, to address affirmative consent.
Basically, what they were saying is that the Catholic
Teach people
Church
how to
is-
give affirmative consent, then that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would.
It's going to lead to
Basically-
teenage promiscuity. Is that what the Catholic?
Basically, what they're saying is that if you teach them consent, that because they know that it's okay, that they will go and start having sex because you just said that as long as you get consent, it's completely fine.
Susan, are you looking
Right.
forward to teaching kids how to have sex before marriage?
No, that's not my goal.
Okay.
But the reality of the world is things happen, and it'd be better if students were a little informed so that they could make better choices. And the more education we can give them about this issue, hopefully the better choices they can make.
It's almost like the other side is lying.
Well, we want to be able to teach them about, and when we're looking at the rates of STDs going up, we need to be teaching them about that being out there, and this is what could happen. We need to make sure our students are safe, and knowing that affirmative consent means that you are in charge of yourself. And when you say no and you don't feel comfortable, then you're right. You get to say no.
Thank you.
That's the approach we're taking.
What
As
applies
teachers.
to young children is if they are in a position where they may be victimized by an adult or even another child.
And that's why it's so important to have the learning in the K-3 that starts that foundation. Children, I've been teaching the little ones, and they're so smart, and there's so much being put into their world at such an early age. But they're so smart, but they're so young. And to be able to give them the tools to really recognize and give them a little bit more to be in charge of themselves, to recognize that there are adults out there that absolutely value you and believe you and want to keep you safe, and are the people who you need to be turning to. Recognizing people you can trust, that is so important at such a young age. We've got some real issues with child trafficking and things like that. We just got to do something.
There has to be a way, like when affirmative consent sounds like, oh, okay, like consent, but there has to be a way to empower the children. Empowerment. It needs to be shown that this is about you being in charge of you. Exactly. I want to say, and this affirmative consent, everything's just based around this like fear, and there just has to be a way. There's got to be some real positive language and even visualization, just everything, just about empowerment.
And that's kind of what I like about the words that they did choose, affirmative consent, because it is two very, very powerful words put together.
Consent. Yep.
All right, I got another one. Susan, in what grade would this, I mean, would you wait till third grade? Would you start this in first or second? Do you start taking kids on field trips to Lover's Package so they can learn about sex toys?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not taking anybody
Almost
there.
like the other side is lying. Who
In
would have
our
thought?
in our district, they won't even play anything that's not overrated G. So I don't think that they'd ever take you to like a porn shop in the first place.
That's not very affirmative.
No.
That was
One
pretty.
of the things that I'll say that I've heard too, and one of the misnomers that I just is they talk about some of the curriculum that is already out there that's being used in King County for years, probably 35 years, I think, if I looked back, at least 30, is the flash curriculum. And I know that there's been things that have been put out on radio ads and things, and they talk about the flash curriculum for primary students. It doesn't exist. There aren't any. Flash curriculum starts in grade 4. So it's just, it's just puzzling where some of this comes from. And I think a lot of it comes from fear. And it's unfortunate. One of the things that I did when I was in the Shoreline District, I was the coordinator for their health and fitness programs. And we met, this is when the HIV/AIDS curriculum was just coming out. And that was a tough one for parents to swallow as well. So you're going to be teaching about HIV/AIDS prevention to our students. And parents can go through any curriculum that any school district has with a fine-tooth comb. They can sit in on the lessons with the students if they want to. We used to give lessons in the evenings to the parents to show them this is exactly what we're going to be teaching. And some school districts still do that. But there's a lot of opportunity that if we could just get people to step back and take a little bit of a breath and not be so afraid. And like, I heard I heard you say, I think it was Jessica, or the person who was in the video said, be trusting of the teaching professionals. Part of this bill also puts into the mix that the teachers are really going to, the professional training that goes into actually being able to handle this to make it safe and fair and meaningful for all of our students comes from a strong professional development. And so the teachers are going to, I've taught with teachers before where it's like, okay, this is our sex ed professional, and this is a person who's going to teach it to all the kids. And it's kind of the way it went there for a while, but it's very important for all of our health teachers to have that training. And that was one of the things out of the work group that we said that absolutely needs to be a piece of this, is to make sure that it's done very, very well. And like Ethan said, sometimes it's scarier for the teachers than it is the students. And if we're going to do this right, we definitely want to make sure that our teachers are well prepared. And that is part of this bill as well.
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
You can go.
Is there any part of the required standards that includes education and discussion about gender identity?
Yes, we do talk about gender identity. Mm-hmm.
To what degree does it go into?
All I'm familiar with is what we do at the lower grades, and all it is just talking about that it's okay for, say, a girl to wear a ball cap. It's okay for a boy to have long hair. It's just as a person identifies himself, that it really doesn't matter the way that they look. We're going to be accepting of people. The way they want to dress, we're going to be accepting of people. The way they talk, the way they act, we're going to be accepting of people. And so that's basically all that it entails at the levels that I am teaching. Ethan can probably tell you more because he's had that himself at the high school.
I'd say that out of my whole school career, they've never talked about gender identity, which I don't like that they haven't talked about. There's a lot of stuff that they won't talk about. Actually, just thought I'd bring this up. I have my school district's policy on everything, at least what they do. on their website, and they can make everything very clear ahead of time about what they're planning on teaching you. Like read off how it goes per grade level. So if you look at in 7th grade, which is fifth and sixth grade, they talk about human growth, basically puberty, and that's all they talk about. And they do in fifth grade, they use Flash, as you were saying earlier. At least what was developed by Flash. And then in 7th grade, they talk more about puberty. They talk about HIV and AIDS prevention, decision making, and then Washington state laws. And I do remember that about them making that very clear as well about other laws that we have here. 8th grade, basically the exact same thing. For me, it was kind of a repeat of 7th grade. 9th grade is when they start talking about, I think, getting more into consent. That's when they talk about STDs and talk about pregnancy, and they don't talk barely anything else about sex until high school. And after 9th grade, they don't talk about it anymore. And to be honest, I don't think they spend enough time on it, because usually in most of these classes, this only consists of 1 week per the whole school year.
And I have the standards, in front of me right here. And the thing that it comes up, it's basically under self-identity. And just in the standards, 4th grade, identify how friends and family can influence ideas regarding gender roles and identity. 5th grade, describe how media, society, and culture can influence ideas regarding gender roles. It's pretty benign, really. Even 8th grade, summarize, where was I? Recognize how external influences shape attitudes about gender identity. I mean, it's pretty benign. And so when you take that, it isn't, I don't know, to me, it's pretty cut and dried, it's not, there's not a lot of meat on that. And I'm kind of with Ethan sometimes thinking, well, I know that we have students who we need to make sure that we're very conscientious of their the attitudes and the perceptions, and making sure that we're teaching and we're conducting a classroom that is being fair and conscientious of the feelings of all the students that we have in our class. And so that's an important underlying tone that always needs to be there, the self-identity, but also the respect of individuals. And that's part of the curriculum.
Cool.
I'm going to go. Susan, are you looking forward to forcing parents into having their children take these lessons?
Not forcing, no, absolutely not. Anytime a parent would like to opt out, that is, I congratulate them for being a person, because it's a hard topic. And even for a parent to have to sit and talk to your child about this. All the power to them. If they'll take that job off my plate, that's wonderful.
And second question, after the election is over, could I set up a private lesson with you, me, and my wife so you could make her accept my clothes more, because she hates the way I dress?
No, because you dress just like my husband. Not working at my house either.
Who wants to go now? I'm running out here. I should have gotten drunk before I started.
Sex isn't nearly as fun to talk about as you thought, is it?
No, that's not it. I hear some of these criticisms, and I'm just so stunned by the bullshit that I can't keep it all in my head. So I'm going to get some of it out. What kind of gender experiments are you going to do on children?
There are no experiments to be done. We don't experiment on children on anything.
It's almost like they're lying, isn't it?
I don't know I don't even know what that would entail. I don't have a clue.
Well, maybe you better have a talk with Robert Sutherland and he'll explain it to you.
You can let me know.
Ethan, go for the absurd.
Yeah, I'm looking. I'm trying to find all the crazy arguments on the internet right now of anything I can possibly find. It's actually kind of hard to find for some reason.
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if this is already being taught on many different levels in 40% of the schools?
Oh, well over.
Okay.
I had those numbers in front of me earlier today. I know that it's somewhere around, it's over 50% of elementary schools are teaching, and we're talking elementary school, the 4th and 5th grade, because they're teaching the HIV/AIDS prevention, and they're doing some of the standards for they do body systems and talking about healthy relationships. They're doing some of those already. I think it was almost 70% of our middle schools and almost 80% of our high schools are already teaching it.
Okay. I was just, so is it the part that's kind of blowing everybody's minds is the younger?
I think that's what it is. And just the fact that in our standards, as I look at my standards, it up until about 4th grade, a lot of the things, it basically says developmentally appropriate outcomes first appear in grade 4, things like that. And so so there's nothing to teach in those standards for those. Mostly our smaller kids, that's why it says, because they do want something taught within this law in the lower grades, they do explicitly say that we need to be teaching the social emotional learning. And that is the self-identity, and that's the relationships. And that's what's so important to start building with those little kids, so that they understand some things that are happening, that they might encounter as they're growing older. And it becomes so much easier for them to understand nuances of relationships as they get older, if they have a good foundation of what good relationships and healthy relationships are about.
Yeah.
So that's why they insisted that it be in there.
Okay. Yeah. I just feel like a lot of my parent friends are like, oh, they're teaching sex ed to kindergartners, to 5-year-olds, without even really examining what that means.
Right. And it comes a little sticky just because of the fact that when the standards are written, relationships falls under the sexual education set of standards. That's where that falls.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it falls there, that's where it got into the sex ed thing, just because when we teach about relationships, in order to see how those standards build on each other as we move up through to the high school level,
Mm-hmm.
it made sense to put them into the sexual ed components rather than in something else, because we were talking about self. When we're talking about in our social emotional learning, it's more of a self and mental health. And in order to talk about it, when we decided to put relationships into the sexual ed, because of building on understanding the nuances of that as you grow older.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's where it came. I think that's where the stumbling block came, is it just happens to land there in the standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should call it like education instead of sex. I don't know, it's like,
If we could put it in relationships in social emotional, but then but that isn't the way the state standards, and that isn't the way the national standards are written. And so in order to be in line with what's going on, with our national standards and our state standards, that's kind of where it lands. So
and people freak out when they hear sex ed, and they just freak out. Like I saw something on TV, something like, they're going to teach our kindergartners how to have sex. I'm like, what?
oh boy.
I have a question for Susan. Since I saw you on the YouTube video testifying in front of the legislature, did any of the legislators who are in opposition to this now, by the way, this is a serious question.
Okay.
who are just lying about what is in the bill, did any of them make those complaints to you publicly at
No.
the time?
No, not at all.
So to be clear, this is something they made up after the testimony was done. Your testimony was done in front of the legislature.
Or possibly even before, but it was never anything that I had directed to me before. Mm-mm.
To make
or
this even
after.
clearer, so look, I've seen you testify. I've watched the YouTube video of you testify in front of the legislature. They will say this behind your back. They will say this while they're running. But they would not make any of these complaints to you publicly when they could have and have it on the legislative record, correct?
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. That is a great piece of information.
Yeah.
If this was so important, if this was so damaging, why would the legislators not have brought it up at the time?
That's a good point.
Yeah. You know, and I don't know. It's just those were not things, you know, you heard what was going on in the testimony, and those were things that just did not come up during the testimonies. And while we were visiting legislators, this was not anything I ever encountered talking to any of the legislators prior either. So
Both Republican and Democrat?
right. Mhm.
How many days or weeks did it take of testimony, conversation, meetings until final vote? And the reason why I'm asking this is that one of our representatives in her own ads said they pushed this through in the middle of the night, like it was some kind of secretive thing. But I kind of remember reading about it in the news. There was several days at least, possibly weeks. Do you
Right.
know how long it took for the whole process till final vote?
Well, actually, it took a couple of years because we thought it was going to go through the first year pretty benignly. And so then it was a whole nother year. And the times that I went down to Olympia, I know that there were at least, if not a month, at least several weeks in between the times I testified and the times that I went down and lobbied. It was quite a long time because we started lobbying at the beginning of the legislative session, and I can't remember the exact date that it went to a vote, but it was several weeks.
It was a long, involved, interactive process.
Oh, very much so, yes.
And nobody ever raised any of these complaints that they are raising now to your face throughout this process?
No, I never heard it from anybody. You know, of course, there were some people who had some testimony for the opposition during the time that brought up some of these things, but it wasn't, you know, but they were testifying just as I was to the committee, and not anything I heard from the committee.
And like I want to keep repeating this point. No legislators now who are throwing a giant fit about this, who raised, like my opponent prides herself on how many signatures she turned in to get this on the ballot. So do you remember none of these legislators ever publicly spoke to you while you were testifying or during the process the way they are speaking about this law now?
No, huh? Not at all.
Out freaking standing answer. Thank you. I know where this is going. I know what this is. Everybody knows what this is. This is Republicans bullshitting their base into voting for something. And these types of initiatives and laws increase Republican turnout. And they're very good at this. But the reason I keep asking you this question is, if this was so important, if this bill was so damaging, if this law was so damaging, wouldn't they have brought it up at the time?
I would think so. We didn't have, you know, there were not any of those hard questions. There were not any hard questions at all that were brought up in any of the times that I testified. And and not in any of the visitations that I did as we were lobbying with the legislators. There's just never did encounter anything like this when I was down in the
So none of the legislators asked you if you were going to teach kids to masturbate?
No, they did not.
Huh. So it's like all of these questions I've been asking, which have come from the opposition, were made up later?
As far as I know.
Ethan, you got anything?
I couldn't really find that much against referendum 90. Like referendum 90 has a website to vote yes, but there's not even one to vote no. Actually, if you look on
Oh, there
ballot-
is. There's a No on 90 Facebook group.
Oh, Facebook group. I mean, I was looking for like a website. If you look on Ballotpedia, you can see how much money each specific campaign has raised. I just want to hear, how much do you guys think that yes has raised?
Oh, very little.
We haven't done very many.
They've raised about 1.3 million, and then no has raised about 300,000.
Oh, that much money. I don't know where that money came from.
All right.
Hey.
Susan, do you know of any teachers personally, or even through the grapevine, that refuse to teach this new curriculum?
No, not at all. Most of the teachers that I know and the ones that I teach with, they don't understand what the big deal is either, because they already do teach a comprehensive program. And as far as our little kids, our primaries, it's already part of our social emotional education that we're doing at the primary school. So they're not concerned about this either. So yeah, they really are kind of shaking their heads as well. It won't change much about what's going on in my school district, because my district's already made that, they already teach more than the HIV/AIDS prevention. And we've made a big commitment in our district, and so have many of the districts in Washington State, to teach more social emotional learning. We see how important that is with kids, and the teaching of relationships is a really important part of that.
Jessica, do you have anything you would like to ask?
I don't really. I already voted, and I don't disagree with any of it.
All right, you've been very quiet, so I wanted to give you a chance to speak.
Thank you.
A little thing to add. Has anyone seen the Parks and Rec episode called Sex Ed?
Yes.
That episode. Oh, that's basically what they're. I kind of compared that to this, at least the opposition to that, the family group in Pawnee that said that sex ed can't be taught because the only correct way to have sex is just don't have it at all, and so you shouldn't be teaching them anything else with that, and how it's illegal in Pawnee to teach that in the first place.
Oh my gosh.
Abstinence is part of this. I have read the training. But that's obviously not for. Anybody else want to ask me? Because I still have questions.
If you do.
As absurd as I want. Look, I'm trying to cover all bases here. I mean, I'm a political candidate. Susan, what is being taught in the districts that don't teach sex ed?
Well, the only thing that they're required to teach is HIV/AIDS prevention. So if they're following the letter of the law as it is currently, then that's what they're teaching. So.
At what grades and how long would that take to teach?
It's required by the state of Washington that it is starts at the 5th grade and is taught, and it depends on your school your district gets to decide. You're supposed to have it during middle school, and 2 times I think during high school, and things like that. It usually takes a week, maybe, for a half an hour lesson a day for 5 days at the most.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions before? Because I'm going to rapid fire you questions just to sum this up, Susan, if nobody else has questions. All right. Are you ready for the rapid fire, Susan?
Okay, let's go.
All right. Are you going to teach kids to masturbate?
No,
Are you going to force parents to take this training?
no,
Are you going to take kids on field trips to sex toy shops?
no,
Are you going to make children become lesbians, gay, members of the LGBTQ community? Are you going to force them into that?
no,
Are you going to do gender assignment experiments?
no.
Are sorry, I lost it there. This is just so stupid.
You don't forget the one about teaching fourth graders sexual positions.
Oh,
yes, that's
how
good.
could I forget that?
That's the one I heard.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. That's not true. You don't just
No,
wait. There's no
No.
Pornhub and no Kama Sutra involved or anything.
no, not at all. It's just pretty, yeah.
Holy crap! It's like their life.
You think?
Isn't like The Office?
I'm sorry. I can't. Thank you for this. I can't believe I made it that long without laughing. But it's just such a bunch of crap. And like, there's more to this than just the initiative. This is an attack on the public schools. This is an attack on teachers. And like, if you are a parent and you're sending your kid to a school where you think this is going on, what does that say about you as a parent?
Yeah, yeah. If you really believe that things like that, and that's part of, we want to, I understand their fear. I do understand the fear. I do. And I have compassion for them that they're fearful, but it's the education that needs to happen, and educating parents need to educate themselves about what's going on in school. And the best place to do that is to go and ask the teachers. Go to school and visit the classrooms. It's not a secret place. You're more than welcome. I do feel that, but yes, if you really think that things like that are happening in your students' classroom, why are you keeping them there? Yeah, oh my goodness, no. So yeah. Come and visit our schools and come and look at the curriculum that is being taught. Go through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Thank you.
We have absolutely nothing to hide.
Let me ask this question. If Referendum 90 is not approved, what changes in your district?
Nothing really changes in my school district. We've already committed to, before any of this even started, we made the commitment to the type of education that we are doing in our district and the standards that we are teaching to. So, my district, nothing.
Is it possible for individuals to run, let's say you teach in Edmonds, is it possible for individuals to run for the school district and win the election and get you to stop teaching what you are currently teaching?
Boy, I'm sure I have to say it probably, maybe possible. Probable, I would say absolutely not probable.
Okay.
That
Where I'm going with this is the local control that so many want to keep. That looks to me like they want to keep it.
Oh, absolutely, and they need to keep local control. Local control is extremely important.
Well, what I'm saying is that, so these districts that are teaching nothing now, they want to keep it that way. And there are many things that are threats to them, this being one of them. But if the quote unquote wins of them keeping local control is higher STD rates and higher teen pregnancy rates and higher suicide rates and things like that for the kids in those districts, What are they winning?
It's a good question. They're losing the base of their community, and that's unfortunate. And they're not doing a service to their children. Their children are, you know, might be growing up in a small isolated community, but that child needs to be prepared for a world that they are going to choose to live in, which might not be a small community in, you know, North Central Washington or something. And it's very important that they are educated and feel comfortable in a world that they're actually going to be living in.
Perfect. That's a perfect way to sum this up. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, what happens if you have one of those smaller communities, schools, and the teachers aren't on board with teaching this? What if the teachers' attitudes about this referendum is, oh, this is crap, you know? And then how do you, I'm just thinking about a teacher that is not behind it. They don't believe in it.
Mhm.
And they don't have any experience or any passion about it. I guess I just feel like, you know, how do you prevent that from, like, if they're forced to teach it, but they don't believe in it?
That's a really good point, because I'll say this: in my 9th grade year, the person that taught me in my class was about 60 years old and an old man that probably was not completely trained very well on it. I'll say that, but definitely did not want to teach it, and only spent the least amount of time possible on it.
Yeah, and that feels like that could be really even damaging to the kids, because the kids could feel like, oh gosh, if the teacher's not behind it, then this is even more embarrassing. Like if a teacher's going, I don't know why I'm talking about sex, and I don't know why I'm talking about gender, but here we go. And then the kids have to feel like, well, I was really interested in this subject, and now the teacher isn't even enthusiastic about it. And I guess that's sort of, you know, because English teachers want to teach English, math teachers want to teach math, but what about these people? Maybe.
Well, and that's the situation you can run into it, like I was going to say, with any subject, because I do know, you know, there's been situations in every subject area where, because of numbers and when the, you know, everything gets going in the fall and all of a sudden we've got so many kids, we don't have enough English teachers. Oh, you happen to have an English endorsement. There you go. You might be in a place where you really don't want to teach something you don't want to teach. And that's why we have an evaluation system for teachers, and that you do need to show that you're competent. And to be able to get that competence, we need that professional development. I belong to the Shape Washington group, the Society for Health and Physical Education, and we do trainings at least twice a year. OSPI does trainings as well. The ESDs do trainings. And you know, so there's a lot of opportunity out there for teachers to receive the training that they'll need to do this, and especially now we're getting so good with webinars and Zoom meetings and things. A lot of it can be done remotely, so even being in a remote school district is not an excuse to prepare yourself as an educator. And so if you're a teacher who's teaching something you hate, you're probably in the wrong profession, and you need to find something better to do with your time. So
I think that a really good thing to do in all subjects would be to get student feedback. Get students to say, did this help you? Did this education help you? Did you feel encouraged? How did your teacher do? Was your teacher encouraging? You know, was your teacher inquisitive? Did your teacher care how you were taking it? I think it'd be really great to get that kind of feedback from students like Ethan.
Yeah.
Could,
Oh, I would love my school to listen to the things I've said. Like last year, I had a geometry teacher that has been working at our school for about no, he said like it was 30 years ish, and he's been teaching geometry that whole time. He doesn't want to teach geometry. He wanted to teach physics, but he's been teaching geometry 5 periods a day, and complained about it every day, and did not help us at all with our class. didn't do
Oh.
anything. So, and
That's
when we tell the
cool.
administrations, they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll just take you out of the class," even though that half the class is trying to leave his class. They don't do anything about it.
I laugh because this is like the age old, we've all experienced this like in school, right? But I laugh because in life, you end up in similar situations with people who are just grumpy and don't want to be there and they're difficult to work with and you got to figure your way through it. In school, having teachers like that helps you at least, figure out a way to navigate it and get to the other side. but also timeless. I mean, how timeless, things never change,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I would love to allow for students to give feedback on their teachers'
And
performance.
that's something that's actually encouraged within the teacher evaluation system that we have. It is encouraged for teachers to ask students and to do surveys about how do you feel about how the class went, what was something you liked, what is, that's to evaluate. Definitely, that is, student feedback is golden. It can, the only thing it can do is help you be a better teacher.
Right.
That's the only thing it can do.
All right, Susan, I'm going to give you a chance to sum up everything we've talked about here. Hit it.
What I'd like to say just in closing is I appreciate so much that we had some folks here, and Ethan, thank you so much, because we do not get an opportunity to hear from students nearly enough. We absolutely welcome that. And when I was on the workforce, the work group, hearing from students was probably one of the strongest guiding forces in the work that we did. We listened to groups from small communities, large communities, different backgrounds. It was phenomenal. So yeah, thank you so much for being there. This referendum, one of those things that just kind of blew me away that it would even come to this. But I think that actually, particularly one way or another, but when it does pass, when it is approved, I think it's going to be one of those really strong things that say, yes, our community has come together and realized this is something that's really important that we need to do for our youth, for all of our children, and for our youth and for our young adults. It's something that we absolutely as a community need to do. And we need to be behind each other and supporting each other, whether we are a parent who chooses to do the education for our own children at home. But we are allowing students who are from other backgrounds who might not have that same support in their home to have the same level of education and care about who they are as individuals. I think it's going to say a lot about our community to be able to say we've done this because this is our students and our young adults, our children are our future, and we need to have they need to be able to go forward with as much confidence and knowledge as we can give them. So, and this is an important part of it.
Outstanding. Thank you for coming. Please stay for the next, for Erica's presentation.
I got to go because I promised I've got a horse. I've got to go put a blanket on tonight because it's supposed to get cold.
Erica, can you make it short? It's only going to be 5 minutes or so.
Oh, I can do that. I can do that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please stay for the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right.
Hit it, Road Dog.
All right. Well, Susan, I'm so grateful to all the work that you've been doing. And, I know it has taken a bunch of people, but I just got to say it's awesome. So thank you. I guess what I wanted to, what Ryan was wanting me to talk about, and I'm willing to talk about, is my school experience growing up. And my mom is here tonight. None of this will shock her. We've been to a lot of family therapy, so don't worry about her. But I did go to public school until the age of 10. And then my parents put us in a private school. It ended up being like a religious cult school. So there was no sex education. There was no art. There was nothing. We were basically just handed pamphlets for like math, English, social studies, science, word building, teach yourself, you know, volunteer teachers there. And, you know, the molestation and the abuse started when I was like physical, started when I was 13, but I think that the grooming started at a much younger age, and I didn't recognize the signs. And actually, I didn't even know that I had been raped, that I had been abused in that way until I was in my 20s and I went to therapy because I was having like a breakdown, and they started asking me questions about my childhood. And it took a therapist to tell me that I had been raped. And it was like, oh my gosh, you know, like I had held so much shame and I had felt like there was something wrong with me all this time because I did speak out. There was numerous times where teachers would, because I would get in trouble every day from the teachers, right? There was something wrong with my attitude. There was this and that. And so I told multiple times on the boy who was like grabbing my leg under the desk. And I didn't like it. I was trying to like push that attention away. And I didn't know what to do. So it was like, I told the people in charge who I didn't necessarily trust, but they were the only ones I could tell. So one of the times that I did that, I was held, so the school was like 30 kids, and they stood me up in front of the whole school with another girl who sat, so our desks were like rows of desks, right? Like one big tabletop. So it was like me, this boy, and then a girl on the other side of him. So the pastor, who was also the principal of the school, he stood me and the other girl up in front of the whole school, which was like 30 kids. And he said, who here thinks, he basically compared who was prettier, me or Julie, the other girl. And because most people said she was prettier, therefore I was lying. And it was like, there were several times where I like actually blacked out. So like in my memory, I remember standing there. I remember everybody raising their hands. And then when he turns to me, like my memory is just kind of, there's nothing really there. So there's a lot of like childhood trauma, like where my body just couldn't really handle that, right? I couldn't comprehend that. And just anytime I spoke up, it was like I was the whore. And so then when I was a teenager, when I was like 14, I wore a tank top to youth group. And therefore I was a slut. And the pastor, they took me to their house after youth group and showed me the Accused with Jodie Foster, the rape scene. And that was like, basically they were saying that's what was going to happen to me, right? So, and I mean, that I feel like that was also like part of the I mean, there was a lot of grooming going on, but I wish that, so obviously it's a private school, so it can't adhere to like the same education standards that this has. But when I got out, when I left the cult, I left when I was 25. And my biggest thing was, number one, I wanted my kids to be raised different than me. I wanted their lives to be different. And number two, I was going to believe kids. I was not going to discount what they had to say. If they were going to tell me something was going on, no matter what it was, I was going to believe them. And so far that's worked out. But I just felt like it's so important to listen to the kids. And when they feel uncomfortable, when they're feeling anything, it's so important to validate that. And my story is not the only story like mine. It's just one of many I have found out, you know, just in my writing. Like I've had people reach out to me and say, thank you, because people can go their whole lives feeling this shame and they never find out that what was happening to them was abuse and that it was wrong. And it happened, you know, just talking to my family, like my grandma said, you know, I never liked my dad's friend so-and-so. And just talking to her in her 80s before she died, it's like, well, why not? And kind of exploring that and finding out like she held on to this trauma. You know, it happens like down the lines of families and it never gets stopped. And it needs to be people standing up and recognizing it and saying, we got to stop it as much as we can. And I ended up with, so thankfully I didn't get too many like STDs. I ended up with HPV, which was the type that went away on its own, but that was scary. It's really scary to feel like something that happened to you that you didn't want to have happen then caused what could be permanent damage within yourself. Like that was really hard. And I didn't know, like, we didn't go to the doctor. I didn't know about Planned Parenthood or any help that I could get. So each time after I was raped, I would go somewhere where nobody else was around and I would like punch myself in the stomach because I did not want to get pregnant. So I was like trying to figure out what to do to prevent that. So let's see. I feel like raising more awareness around the like affirmative consent, or, who is a safe person that you can talk to, and just having someone there to listen, even if you feel like, because of course, when you're a child, you feel like, oh, I must have done something wrong, that this person did something to me that I didn't want to have happen. And that was me. I felt like I had done something to deserve this, and I had not. So, I don't know. I'm on board with this because I feel like the younger that kids can be to learn about, the consent and what people like and don't like, then they can grow up, they can grow from there. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Can I ask this question, Erica?
Yeah.
If you had been taught these lessons that Susan is speaking of teaching of, before you ended up going to the church school, would you have known what was going on?
If I had been taught like my little time in public school?
Correct.
Well, I had a little bit, I did have a little bit of, like they talked a little bit about what's okay and what's not okay, and like who can see under your clothes, like that type of thing when you go to the doctor or your parents or whatever. So I think I did have a little bit of this was wrong in my head. But I had no one to really help me. But I feel like if it had been more drilled in, like if I had had maybe more education about who to go to and what to say when you need help, that type of thing, and really like what's okay, what's not okay, and kind of like line it up, I feel like it would have helped a lot.
Yeah, and thinking about relationships, like teaching that pastors aren't always good, teachers aren't always good. That's the thing, is that we believe, like, we believed pastors wouldn't do that. Pastors' kids wouldn't do that. The boy was the pastor's son, and he's just one of, and the thing is that's the other thing, is teaching about relationships. Like, doctors aren't always good. If you're not comfortable with your doctor, say no. If you're not comfortable with your pastor, say no. If you're not comfortable with the Pope, or a teacher, or your parents, or your cousin, or your aunt, or your uncle, or your brother, or your sister. I mean, yeah, these things need to be taught.
It's I appreciate that so much, Erica. I'm so glad that yeah, I stayed for that, because that's exactly, and what your mom said, exactly the thing. Even if, and that's part of the education that I do with students as well, is it, even if it's not say a bad person or something bad they're doing, if that child is not comfortable with it, it's not okay. It's just not. And that's part of beginning that affirmative consent education, is being able to understand my own feelings about things. And maybe, I've had some little kids who were not okay, say sitting with another, close to another student, like a partner sort of thing. you know, understanding that, and then, but allowing them to see how the dynamics work and fill themselves into a dynamic of a relationship before they could settle. And if it didn't feel comfortable, even though it wasn't going to be anything bad, nothing's bad's going to happen. You've got to you got to understand and respect the feelings that child has to allow them to grow through that. And you're not going to do it just mentioning it, you know, and you can't wait until 4th, 5th grade. These are things you have to start allowing the child to experience and understand and learn how to work within that whole dynamic of their own self at an early age when they're little, before, you know, before things happen. And it's unfortunate that things happen. It's so sad that things do happen.
No,
I guess that's my thought, is like, because things are going to happen, right? Like, I'm not going to live in this world where we understand that, like, nothing's ever going to happen if we vote for R90, but like knowing what supports are there. So when things do happen, what then? Right. So
my problem with what's going on right now, at least in my school district specifically, is that in elementary school, they don't talk about consent at all, which I guess could be a problem with, I guess, if you look at in Erica's situation, even if the same situation happened to her right now, she would still not have learned about consent still today. In middle school, they still talk about it, but I've learned more in this meeting about consent than I would have in school, which is a problem. So I think that they teach you the basics about consent. They don't teach you enough. Like, just in Erica's story alone, people would have learned more about consent than they would have in school. So
yeah, they should have real life people come in and give, like, you know, like Erica, go into a classroom and share her story and see how many people it impacts. See how many people can relate to that. And she's just one person. That'd be very impactful. That's good, Ethan. That helps
very much.
All right, I'm going to try, and I want to thank Susan for coming. I want to thank Erica for speaking. I want to thank everybody for coming. Susan has to go. Susan, I know you've never been to one of my Zooms before, and I know this is the first, you know, we've never talked in person until tonight. My Zoom meetings go on for a while, so if you put the blanket on your horse, you can come back. We'll probably still be here for a while. So
Talking long after we stop recording.
yeah, I want to thank you for coming, Erica. I want to thank you for giving your talk.
Yes,
outstanding presentation. I'll call you tomorrow too, Susan. But again, thank you for being here tonight. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you for teaching our kids, because I sure as hell couldn't do it. And again, thank you for being here tonight. It was great, and you gave us so much good information.
Well, you're welcome, and you know, spread the word out there. I mean, it's like it's just not that big scary thing, and
Will do, Susan.
All
and
right.
Again, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you so much for all of you being here. Thank you so much, Erica, for sharing. It's sad that that's the things that we need to hear, but if that's what will help another person, you know, avoid the same situation, or at least be able to get help, that's what we need to do. So
yeah, I agree. Thanks, Susan.
All right, thanks, guys. I'll head out.
All right, thank you. Joy, we can stop recording now.
Hold on a second here.